the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl, episode number 133, January. That would be 2022. As we've said before, I mean, December and January, it is a time of great death, loss, mourning, and I don't know why. I've known of 4 deaths in the past month.
Yes, I've known of probably about the same, and one being Tom Smith, who died, who was mentioned in the Rat episode. If you don't know who he is, look him up. And that was a shock to us all. And it didn't die of COVID. It was like, you got cancer, buddy, and then 2 weeks later he's dead. So
and Billy the artist, one of our early podcasts, he unexpectedly died of cancer.
Yeah.
He was about to have a show, and none of the people I know that died of COVID, which is at least that. But I mean, December and January, it really sucks people in. Just does.
Yes. It's hard. It's hard.
Well, there might be some hope for all my depressive friends out there. A new study from Stanford University, a new protocol for treating severe depression using transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is showing the most success of any, basically resulted in remission for 79% of the people in a double-blind study. So this kind of treatment has been used previously, but the new protocol is an individualized and non-invasive method, which works very well in alleviating severe depression and providing lasting benefits. This new article was published in the American Journal of Psychiatry, something I spend many nights cuddling up to. And it's true. It builds on an already approved stimulation treatment called intermittent theta burst stimulation, ITBS. And during that kind of treatment, magnetic pulses are delivered to the region of the brain thought to be implicated in depression. But that treatment takes a really long time. And now they've actually condensed this treatment so that over basically a 5-day period, there seems to be a lot of success. And it's definitely an improvement on what we have out there now, of which, there's so many types of depression.
Yeah, there's so many different types. There's environmental, there's chemical. We've
gone through all of this, but basically the only side effects of the new therapy is occasional fatigue or headache. So I say, let's all get stimulated.
I agree with that statement.
Electrical stimulation always cheers me up.
Yeah, and that can come in many forms also.
Thank you very much.
So it looks like Justice Breyer is about to, or I think he did retire, or he's about to announce it. Well, it says a lot of things. The Democrats know they're about to get destroyed in the midterms, so they're like, we got to get this done. It also brings a spotlight to just everything that's gone down with those judges in the last couple of years. It's already too late. It's already fucking too late. 6-3. Ginsburg, you should have retired when you had cancer and you reached 85. But, she didn't. And a lot of her victories are about to get eroded because of it. So the curse of success can sometimes make it hard to have perspective.
The curse of all politics is antagonism against almost everyone not in the 1%, especially those that are poorer and, as by design, less educated or chronically in debt. So, this is a continuum. This is never anything new. They just are finding new ways to go forward, to go backwards, to pretend to go forward. And this is the game of politics.
Yes. And it's the politics are pretty heavy right now. Looks like Russia is about to invade Ukraine, right? I talked to Mark Ames, who was our guest before, and he might come on again. But he has a lot of interesting insights, and I'd love to have him talk about this because there's a lot of angles here.
As a bullhorn for many decades against the war, against all wars, it's just again shocking to me that with the advancement of such technology, civilization is still in the frickin' cave, that war is the answer, which is not the answer. And I don't even know right now how many countries are actually in war. There is never ultimate peace on this planet. There probably never will be, all down to man's stupidity, greed, arrogance, dominance. I just don't get it. I was thinking about this the other day.
I was thinking about this the other day, and from another angle, as in order for humans to be the dominant species on this earth, and the reason why so many things aren't extinct is because we're just like perverts. Like, well, there's only 64 Rwandan mountain gorillas left. let's just like keep them alive, even though, basically it's sort of like, hey, I ate all the ice cream. No, I didn't. There's like a one piece left in there. I pretended I didn't do it. So in order for us to to be the dominant species, there's a lot of dissonance and forced compromise, and so it's like we're putting guns to our heads, just like we got to conform and see it the same way in order for us to sustain being the dominant species. And it just, we kill each other in order to maintain the ability to dominate and kill all the other species.
Well, and another example of man's utter ridiculousness, a man was recently arrested in Kentucky when authorities found roughly 100 pairs of stolen women's underwear, didn't say whether they were used or not, in his home. The Franklin County Sheriff's Department said Tuesday. John Hawkins III, damn, I wonder what daddy and granddaddy did, has been charged with 7 counts of burglary after a lengthy investigation, according to the police. How long does that take? And by the way, nanny cameras are mandatory now, ladies. Hawkins is suspected of burglarizing multiple homes and removing only, and fortunately, the women's underwear, the department said. He was arrested after new information came to light regarding the string of thefts across the Shady Acres mobile home park. Now, if there's
where's that? That's in Kentucky?
Kentucky. And
Shady Acres. That's a great name.
And if there isn't surveillance cameras in a mobile home, you're really fucked. A residential village and many elderly tenants. So it doesn't say whether maybe it's granny's panties he's stealing, but they turned up approximately 100 pairs of women's underwear. Oh, a couple of bras taken into custody without incident. We go from, invading countries to invading
undies.
Yeah, exactly.
Invading undies. Yes.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
Well, in terms
Tim,
of just
Tim, you can invade my undie anytime you have an army big enough behind you to do so.
Well, as long as you don't invade my underoos, I'll be okay.
Well, as a one-woman army, I wouldn't be met with much resistance.
Oh my God. Well, and I mean, in terms of aggressive or creepy or out of the ordinary, or out of the ordinary sex acts.
Wait, now you're talking about me. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, former professor from Northwestern University, Wyndham Letham, microbiologist at Northwestern, he and his boyfriend were having these insane marathon chemsex sessions, and they were just, I guess they were just up in the ante in their fantasy minds. And so,
do you have their number?
Well, I don't. Basically, they wanted to carry out their sexual fantasy of killing others and then also killing themselves.
Typical fantasy.
This was what was getting their boner. And so the professor, Wyndham Letham, was basically like, in order to pull this off, I think I need someone else. So he somehow recruited this guy, Andrew Warren, from the UK, paid him, and then they were in some like orgy threesome, and then it ended where he ended up killing the younger boyfriend by Trenton Cornell Durham, stabbed him 70 times. So then they found it.
It goes beyond fantasy here.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on. And of course, Northwestern fired the guy because he was just basically like, where is this guy? He's like, he was the number one suspect. He disappeared. Well, they arrested Andrew Warren, who basically did a plea in order to turn in Wyndham Letham. And basically they're both screwed at this point. They're both going to jail. The judge, basically, when he sentenced him, he said, Wyndham basically treated his lab animals better than he treated his boyfriend, and a quote unquote, to butcher an individual in order to fulfill a bizarre, antisocial, perverted fantasy based on whatever sense of reality you have is completely beyond me. And that was the end of that. It's interesting, these judges, and we can say a lot about judges, but when they actually have to do a case like this, and they have to have a final statement, because they have to be kind of anchors of reality, or they're supposed to be at least. And are these judges excited when it's that dynamic? Because there's just, if anyone who's been in a courtroom, there's just so much monotony. It's actually, in reality, it's not like the movie dramas of courtrooms. It's all this boring, drawn out shit. So do they actually like when it's this extreme and
Well,
dynamic?
well, I just got a form to fill out for possible jury duty.
Oh
Been
boy.
not sitting on that for a while. Tim, did you get the story I sent you about the meth addicted squirrel who a guy had trained to attack?
Yes, I did. And you go
Well,
ahead and tell the
I'm
audience.
not. No, I'm just mentioning that in brief because I'm going on to my next story, which
Okay.
unless
Well, they were
unless
called something specifically like meth, like killer squirrels, or they had some kind of different name. And I think it still hasn't been proved. Well, anyhow, I did read about it. It was quote unquote nuts.
I love Ruffy and Tuffy.
I know.
All the squirrels I know are called Ruffy and Tuffy. Anyway, doctors operating on what they thought was a dad of three's hernia instead found the bulge, in fact, contained female genitalia.
Whoa.
The 67-year-old went into the hospital complaining of swelling in his groin that I don't know why it took him a decade to go to the hospital. And he was also only born with one descended testicle. So doctors diagnosed him with a hernia, a type that when the tissue pokes through the groin at the top of the inner thigh. But when they inspected the mass, when they started to operate, they found a uterus, a cervix, fallopian tubes, an ovary, as well as his missing left testicle.
So he had one testicle and one ovary. Wow, this is like real hermaphrodite.
You missed it, Tim. He had one ovary, one testicle,
and all this other
fallopian
stuff.
tubes, cervix,
exactly.
uterus. So the case was revealed in the Journal of Urology from the university that the man was diagnosed with an extremely rare condition known as persistent Mullerian duct syndrome, PDMS, which occurs when men have also female reproductive organs alongside their penis and scrotum. It actually happens in the beginning of in the womb when the duct doesn't break down in the early development of males. But in very rare cases, this happens to some boys being born with both sets of reproductive organs. Now, I mean, as somebody who has to, if you could see me now, sit man spreading, you can't see them, but I've always felt like I got a pretty big set of balls. They just haven't descended. What can I say about that?
Whoa. Well, I'll pray to the god of testicles and see if we can make him drop.
Well, I will pray to the planet Uranus, hoping I will visit it soon. And in the meantime, we will have our next guest, which is who knows a lot about not necessarily Uranus, but the anus in general, and that would be Bruce LaBruce. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl, special guest Bruce LaBruce. Now, for any of you who's not in the know, internationally acclaimed and award-winning manly pornographer, filmmaker, writer, artist based in Toronto. I think you're up to 10 feature films now, a number of short films, music videos that you've written and produced, you've directed, theater work. Visual artist. And I do remember your photographic exhibit in Spain called Obscenity, which caused a bit of controversy just because people are dressed in religious outfits, please. What's sexier or more perverted than religion? And we'll get to your new film soon. You've written a premature, as you call it, a premature memoir called The Reluctant Pornographer, books about you, documentary about you, and written for magazines, newspapers, Vice, The Guardian UK, et cetera. And shockingly enough, your films are now part of MoMA's permanent collection. They let you sleaze into that one, but congratulations.
Thanks.
And your latest film just closed the Venice Film Festival, Saint-Narcisse, which sounds and looks Saint-Narcisse, if you want to say it with your French accent. You are.
I am a Canadian. We're by up here.
I'm half. My father was Canadian. So your new film is receiving quite a few great reviews, actually, and it mixes mythology, religion, self-obsession, sex, twins.
Twincest. The working title was Twincest, actually.
Twincest.
Yeah.
But Lydia's technically a twin.
Well, I murdered my twin in the womb. He was a boy, but I mean, I still feel he's inside me. So basically,
Did you strangle him with the umbilical cord?
We don't know. We don't
Oh,
know.
Because I have one of my best friend in university, she had a twin sister, and when they were in the womb, their names were Sinead and
Charade.
Sinead and Sinead. No, Sinead and Siobhan. When they were born, Sinead had the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck, and she always blamed her sister for deliberately trying to suffocate her in the womb. But she was born then with some problems, like some, she was deprived of oxygen. And so Siobhan was always like this slim, like kind of gorgeous girl with almond eyes. And her sister, you would never know that they were like identical twins. She was like kind of slovenly and overweight, and she was still an amazing girl. But I mean, they were like this, they had this kind of psychic connection. So I was always fascinated from twins with hanging out with her. But she was in and out of mental institutions and stuff, which we would go visit her. And Siobhan would always know when her sister was in trouble. But then sadly, Sinead eventually hung herself.
I decided to beat my twin brother to the punch because I feared not only mental asylums, but possible prison if I, as me twinned, also had a male body. I think one is enough, and that would be me. So here we are.
Yeah. I mean, sibling rivalry starts very early.
It just allows me to be the true multi-functional semi-schizophrenic I am. So, so your film has been playing all around. Where's it gone? I mean, great to close out the Venice Film Festival. When did that happen? In the fall?
That was like a year ago, August. So we were really lucky. It was after the first lockdown. And remember, if you can cast your mind back to that era, remember everyone naively thought, oh, it's going to end like,
right.
In 2020, what was it? 20. Like people were saying, it was 2020, August. They thought, oh, Venice is back. People are actually going in person to show their films. So Cannes will open and everything will open back up again. But it was just like a window that happened. And then it went right back to a month later. I couldn't even go in person to Montreal. I live in Toronto to show at a film festival.
So they're even when they lose the vote to separate the Quebecois, they still kind of try to do it in any logistical way.
Are you kidding me? There's a fucking curfew there right now. There's a curfew now in Montreal.
No. I get that. But it's interesting that they're really being able to block on people from Ontario and all that stuff. It's really.
Well, no, it's insane. I don't know if you remember, but like the first Trudeau before Justin Trudeau, his father, who was prime minister in the 70s. Yeah, he infamously enacted the War Measures Act because the FLQ, the separatist terrorists who quote unquote who kidnap politicians, just like the Baader-Meinhof and stuff. He actually passed the War Measures Act, which hadn't been used in 100 years or something, in order to be able to break down the doors of people, go in, search them if he thought that they were affiliated with the FLQ, and could jail them for 30 days without a warrant, up to 30 days. There's a brilliant film by Michel Brault, Brault, called Les Ordres, or Les Ordres, The Orders, which is about this. It's a brilliant film that was made in the early 70s.
Did you have to fit a certain profile for him to do that, or it was just a universal thing that
it was pretty much based on word of mouth and who might be involved in these crimes and stuff like that. So now, whatever it is, 50 years later, the Quebec passed this curfew. And during the height of the lockdown, like last year, it was 8:00. You couldn't be, and they're actually enforcing it. The police drive around and enforce it. It's insane.
I mean, as if there's a bigger spread during the night than during the day, as if time of day matters to a contagion.
Right. Or I mean, if the bars are closed down anyway, I mean, or
there you go.
They were. I mean, you're not going to get it wandering around outside. I mean, and I have to go back. I'm going back to Montreal. I shot a porn feature for Erica Lust called the Affairs of Lydia, actually.
Excuse me.
Whoa.
Wait a minute, Bruce.
But it's spelled with an I. It's spelled with an I.
LaBruce. I have done my own anti-pornography.
I know you have.
Okay, well, that is a beautiful name. Somebody should use it.
Yeah. So I have to go back next week to finish the edit, and it's a 10 o'clock curfew this time. But I mean, one of the great reasons to go to Montreal is the great nightlife, and especially the strip bars. I mean, it has the best male strip bars in the world practically. Last time I was there was a 7'2" stripper, 7'2".
Whoa.
At campus.
Did you climb that pole?
I did. I got a private dance with him. I had to. He had size 17 feet. I was like, what the fuck?
I'm sure by now, Bruce, you don't need to bring your measuring tape to any of these things. You could just size him up. I mean, and I'm just going to talk about your photography for a few minutes. I mean, so your photography, which is beautiful, by the way, and it involves a lot of erect, gorgeous men. Can you tell just by looking at someone how well hung they're going to be?
Well, that's the thing. This 7'2" guy didn't have the cock that you would expect them to have. I mean, it can be deceptive that way. They say it's based more on the size of the nose than
the middle finger,
than on the height or what have you.
Answer the original question was, Bruce, do
I have good big cockdar?
Cockdar.
Not really. I do find myself being surprised and disappointed sometimes, and then but the opposite of that is when you're happily surprised when there's somebody who you least expected to have one, and it pops out.
When a set of really phenomenal balls make up for something less in length.
I love big balls, but
I will not lie.
But sometimes they can overshadow the cock. Do you know what I mean?
So it's all about proportion. So if you're 7'2", you're really kind of fucked because you better represent, because it just looks so awkward if you're kind of more normal.
That's the thing. He had like a cock that was in proportion to his body, but when you're that big, the expectations are much higher.
What about when someone's like a midget and they're just like hung like a horse? That's the thing.
And that is totally on my bucket list. I want to have sex with a little person I know. If that's the correct,
I wasn't
politically correct term. I hate that term. It sounds more kind of condescending than,
sure,
little person. I mean, or whatever. Vertically challenged. I really want to have sex with. I'm into those kinds of extremes. I really want to experience.
Sure.
Yeah, and I didn't have sex with this. Obviously, it was just a stripper in a back room. Although sometimes you will get a blowjob in a back room.
So you chase novelty. You still chase novelty. You like that idea. I mean, your film Gerontophilia. I mean, that's obviously a thing. People are into the elderly sexually. Was this something that you were kind of like, okay, that's a little bit novel to me, I'm gonna explore that, or is that something you like, or is just a world that you're very familiar with, or where did that come from?
Quite often for my movies, I take a fetish as my starting point.
Okay.
And I guess it started, I mean, in terms of my filmmaking, even way back with my early skinhead, like I had 2 films about neo-Nazi skinheads where a gay character has a fixation on neo-Nazi skinheads. And in
that's
the first
not inconsistent with the truth, though. There's a well, we can talk about that later, but keep on going.
No, of course. I mean, the kind of fetish for kind of these brutes, these kind of authoritarian figures. I mean, I learned all this from Lydia Lunch. I mean, it's
please. Now you're just kissing my left cheek.
Well, let me say it was formative. I mean, you and Richard, and especially. I mean, I was just thinking about Manhattan Love Suicides actually the other day, and I was thinking, you know, all these new films like Annette, no, not Annette, sorry, Titan and stuff, which I haven't watched the whole thing. I watched like part of it, but it was done with so much more panache by Lydia and Richard in the 80s, you know, because this is like, these are like big budget films trying to like have, even like her having sex with a car. My friend, my collaborator, Rick Castro, who I made Hustler White with, he made a film, an underground film in the 90s called I'm in Love with My Car. And it was, he had a guy, a hustler in the desert, fucking a car, set to the song I'm in Love with My Car by Queen, right? And it was gorgeous. It was a gorgeous, you know, authentic piece of like pornographic cinema.
I'll take it one step further. And how about the book by Harry Crews, where a man actually eats a car?
Oh, wow.
Was there an exhaust pipe fellatio scene in this?
Yes. He stuck his dick in the exhaust pipe. Yeah.
Oh, I hope it wasn't on. That would have that would be a terrible burn. Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, just go back to Richard Kern for 1 second, who you're referring to, because when he was making a lot of those films, I mean, these were just something you did as another form of art. And the films that I did with him, especially Right Side of My Brain Are Fingered, I mean, these were just films trying to explain my own fetishes, that I didn't feel I was alone in, but that nobody had expressed as accurately as I thought they needed to be. The need for more, and also, you know, with Fingered, we wanted to make a drive-in exploitation film based on some real experiences I've had. And that's just what we did. One of my favorite films that he did was Goodbye 42nd Street, because we don't have 42nd Street anymore.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I liked about those films of yours and Richard's is just the sense of humor and the kind of the kind of total disregard for any kind of propriety or.
Well, we didn't then, and we still don't give a fuck, and I don't think you do either. So hello, my friend.
I know.
Let's get back to you for a minute. So what have you been doing to get your film shown, considering the lockdown? Where's it been? Where's it going?
Yeah, we kind of got lucky because I shot it before the pandemic hit. And so it was in the can, it was in post-production, and we got interrupted in post. So this would be in 2020. And so I had to wait like 3 months, and then we went back and finished it under all the protocols and everything. Then it premiered at Venice in that little window we had. So we had a proper premiere where we screened it in front of an audience, and that was really cool and glamorous. I was really happy for the star of the film, who'd never been at a big glamorous premiere.
Gorgeous star of the film, by the way.
I know, Felix. Yeah, he's those French Canadian boys from the suburbs and the rural areas and talk about hung. Oh my God. So I mean, I don't know about him particularly, but yeah. And then it was kind of locked down. It was kind of depressing. It was showing at a lot of international film festivals, but virtually, you know, like without audiences and stuff. Like it showed in the Kolkata Film Festival and the Moscow International Film Festival.
That's amazing that it showed in the Moscow Film Festival.
Yeah. I have a cult following in Russia, actually. My friend, you know, our mutual friend, Slava Magutin, always tells me that for some reason in the 90s, my films were really heavily bootleg in Russia.
Well, you know, I've played there many times, but my book is banned, but I'm not banned. Paradoxia is banned there, along with Virginie Despentes, her book Bes et Moi, but I'm not banned, which is weird. And we know that it's very restricted, but it's not that. There's really good people there that want music, film, literature.
Yeah, but in those kind of restrictive, like clamped down societies, there's always this kind of vibrant, queer scene or rebellious scene. Like I was in Moscow only once, and I was there for showing my film, which is crazy. I went to Kiev and Moscow to show my film LA Zombie, which is probably one of my most extreme films, which is about an alien zombie who comes to Earth and he finds dead bodies that are recently dead bodies and fucks them back to life. And it's a hardcore movie starring Francois Sagat, but it also has a softcore version, which is still really hard. Like there's a scene where he has a fake prosthetic weird penis that's really big, that it was done by, you know, analog special effects. And when he comes black squid ink. So he finds his body on the highway after this car accident, and he fucks his chest with this prosthetic cock and rubs his cock against the heart until it starts beating again. And that's like the opening, one of the opening scene of the
that's
film.
that's beat on, not a beat off, right there. Yeah.
There you go. And it showed somehow at festivals, these festivals, not even gay festivals, you know, in Kiev and Moscow. And I went kind of naively to like show them. And I kind of was noticing that people were a bit freaked out, but I hung out with Slava's friends, and his friend, some of his friend Spider took me to this squat that was within, you could see the American embassy from the squat. And it was this amazing, huge building that was built by a famous Jewish architect that was totally Soviet era and based on Soviet principles and, you know, Marxist principles, sort of communal. And they're all like, they're so, you know, they have this absurdist humor. They have a very absurdist kind of surreal humor that allows them to deal with how monumentally fucked up the country is. And they actually kind of express themselves in very kind of extreme ways that you don't even find in capitalist societies where everything is supposedly open and, you know, we can all like just do whatever we want, you know, theoretically. But I mean, you know, those cultures in a way give you an illusion of freedom on a certain level where you think everything goes, but we all know what happens. I mean, they have a more subtle way of censoring your work. And,
well, I mean, the bigger the wall is, the harder you want to kick it down. And that wall has confronted all of us to some degree or another. How do you get financing for your films? And this, your latest film seems like it's the largest budget. It looks really beautiful. I saw the trailer. I haven't seen the whole thing yet. I can't wait. It looks really beautifully shot. How do you finance? How did you finance this film?
This one and my film Gerontophilia, which I made, we were talking about earlier, about intergenerational love. I mean, one thing I have to say about Gerontophilia, I was under so much pressure by the funding agencies to make a love story between an 18-year-old and this 80-year-old, but they just happen. It's not about their age. They just happen to meet each other and fall in love despite their age. And I very definitively wanted it to be about an 18-year-old boy who has a sexual fetish for the elderly, and he actively seeks them out. It's like a reverse Lolita almost, you know. And they were, you know, people tried to convince me, because I'm getting more money from these government funding agencies.
Which is amazing, by the way. It really is truly phenomenal that they are financing you.
Yeah, well, Quebec, I had to go to Quebec. I couldn't get arrested in English Canada, and I had a number of projects turned down, including an amazing script about von Gloden, the famous German photographer who in the late 19th century was shooting boys, you know, Sicilian teenage boys in Taormina, and he was an early pioneer of photographic technique, and he's now considered a master. But he, because he was, you know, having sex with teenage boys and photographing them, he was considered a pornographer, and he was persecuted by the fascisti. It's an amazing script, and I couldn't get it financed at all. So then I got a producer in Quebec, because Quebec is a much more open, despite its like fascist tendencies, it's whatever, proto-fascist tendencies. It's like I'll get in trouble for saying that, but
you can say it. We're generalization tolerant here.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, with that said, would you say Quebec's maybe
it's open more culturally?
Sluttiest, you think it's one of the sluttiest regions on the planet? I would say it is.
That's one way of saying culturally more open, sluttiest.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And no, it is their attitude towards it's more, you know, it's more supposedly what European is like. It's like more open to kind of expressing sexuality. Nudity is not a problem, you know.
Bruce, let me ask this. So people, if you're applying for funding or for financing for your films, people obviously know what you have done. They probably presume what you are going to do. When you write a proposal, do you pretty it up a bit or do you just put all the balls on the wall?
Well, that's funny you should say that, because the government agencies are SODEC, which is the provincial film financing body, and Quebec Telefilm, which is another, you know, funding agency of the government, more federal based. When I go into a meeting to pitch a project, I basically have to literally spend the first 10, 15 minutes saying, this is not a porno. I
Wow.
practically have to do a PowerPoint presentation saying, this is, penis A is not going to go into asshole B, I really have to convince them that I don't have nefarious purposes. But in that way, they're written from the beginning as more kind of quote unquote mainstream kind of narratives, because I know that you can only push them so far, right? So from the very beginning, they know it's not. And I know that it's not a porno, and I'm not trying to get away with something.
Why do you feel as an artist that it's important to make, first of all, a feature length, not completely porno film, as opposed to making just really great porno? I mean, what is that issue with you?
And I do insist on continuing to make porno. So I just made this movie for Erica Lust, which is a feature film, which is shot in 7 days, and it's for a porno, it has a pretty big budget, and it's full on porn. It's bisexual porn, actually. You must know Erica Lust from Barcelona.
Yes, I know who she is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, her company anyway. But so that kind of allows me to keep making this more sexually explicit work. But in order to get into the bigger budgets, I mean, you have to convince them somehow that it, has this kind of more artistic merit, which is always bullshit. I hate that.
Well, also, let me just say this: there could be violence to the nth degree in mainstream films, as we know,
Right.
and sex to the 0 degree for the most part, still, which is ridiculous, and that's mainly this country anyway. But it's pretty universal. Like, you can show 100 heads being chopped off, but dare you show consensual and perhaps even beautiful sex between people?
Well, that's the point. Like European cinema, they will show explicit sex, but my theory is they will only show it if it's depicted as kind of ugly and degraded or something. But they will not. They don't want you to show like sex that is beautiful and kind of poetic or whatever, that doesn't have some kind of pathology attached to it.
That is the trickiest thing to really portray.
Yeah,
I mean, that's really difficult.
Well, it's more threatening. It's more threatening to the mainstream if it's considered something loving and tolerant. Ultimately,
it's just about getting access to those bigger budgets, because as a filmmaker, it's very seductive to want to. Like, I had worked with this amazing cinematographer who has worked with a lot of the great, Quebecois directors and stuff. And we tried to make the film in the style of 70s Quebecois movies, which are very specific. They're quite often about this idea of family secrets and rape and incest in the past, and that come back to haunt characters. And they're very aesthetic and very, frank about sexuality. And they have a specific style from that era as well. So, only with a bigger budget was I able to kind of pay homage to those kinds of films and make it, visually splendid and gorgeous, and also push it as far as I could in terms of the sexuality, which was like sex between these two twin characters, which
I couldn't think of anything better. I mean, then usually having sex with myself is the best sex I have anyway. I'm untwin, but still I get the point.
I mean, Larry Clark, I've read articles where he's running into similar situations where it's like, okay, tone it down if you want the bigger budgets. I guess this is a trend, if you will, that if you're transgressive in any way, you want a bigger budget.
It's also about the times. I mean, Larry Clark would not ever be able to make kids today. I mean,
no, or even release Tulsa, one of my favorite books. I mean,
right.
The photography of Larry Clark was stunning. And
Ken Park was never even shown here. I mean, I only saw that in Europe. You can't get that in the United States. You probably can now, but I couldn't find that.
Yeah. Ken Park and my movie LA Zombie are the last two movies that were banned in Australia, actually.
Fortunately, in Australia, we have Jack Sargent, but I mean, who manages a lot of the film festivals, but he can't save us from, the censors necessarily either. So,
yeah. So I don't know. It's, it's partly a sign of the, it's partly the zeitgeist, the new culture, the kind of anti-sex culture that you have to fight against to get these films made.
Well, Bruce, let me ask you this, because I think what's really weird is we have on one hand the new Puritanism, absolutely
Totally,
ridiculous.
absolutely.
But on the other hand, we have the Cardi B's, and we have
Yeah,
like the
I know.
popcornification. So I don't really understand what the bridging of that divide is, and it's to me so extreme and on either side. It's
I
just
think it's schizophrenic. I think it's
it's
absolutely
very
schizophrenic.
it's very
Yeah.
schizophrenic.
Yeah.
And
And you have, you have kids that have access to pornography. I mean, kids are much smarter than their parents. They know how to watch whatever the fuck they want on their devices, and so they have,
And they do.
and they do.
And
they
I
have,
think the problem with that kind of access is if you have access and not even knowing what you're going to access in pornography before you've actually had sex, I think it can be very detrimental. I think once you've had sex, whatever is your fetish, there are no taboos to me with if it's consensual, do what you want. But if you haven't had sex and then you're seeing this sex that is so bombastic, I think that's really dangerous and unfortunate. I think it's just devastating.
I agree with you, but on the other hand, it is what it is, and they do have access to it. And so it's a bit naive to kind of like, for adults to kind of like say to them, okay, well, you can only watch movies with,
Of
that are kind
course,
of
no
cleaned
way.
up, because they know more about sex than you do. I mean, on a certain level.
I'm not promoting sex at an earlier age, but every state does have a different age of, consent, which is ridiculous as well. And so do other countries. But I'm just saying it might
but,
be.
but those constructs, I mean, that's what's dissonant is basically the expansion of childhood has been a construct that's been pushed since the Industrial Revolution, which allowed kids, the middle class have access to mass education. It was before that, if you're standing, you were working, unless you're aristocracy. And so it's just because nature says as soon as you're producing sperm or as soon as a woman's have it menstruating, nature's basically saying, okay, you can have sex now, but these constructs. So it's interesting that we want to expand childhood, yet at the same time, the digital age infrastructure is basically saying, hey, now you have access to the most extreme abstraction of sexuality. It is schizophrenic, but it's a head-on collision that we didn't really see where that was going to fall, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, my introduction to pornography when I was a kid, like in the 70s, was my brother's copies. I have a brother 6 years older than me, and he was in university, and so I would have access to his copies of Naked Lunch that they actually, were teaching Naked Lunch in university, and Henry Miller, Tropic of Capricorn.
By the way, my favorite, Bruce, my favorite book, my favorite passage is in Tropic of Capricorn. I did a recording of it with the music of Grid, which is Tim's alternative avant group. And it's my favorite book, period.
Yeah, but I mean, that there's such a difference when you have a literary introduction to pornography, in a way, because it's not just this kind of brutal. Well, it's not all brutal, but this kind of,
hyper. It's hyper.
Hyper and kind of like removed from any narrative context. So there's no whatever. There's no foreplay. There's no poetry. Romance. There's no poetry. There's no romance. Yeah.
And the problem with most pornography is the lack of poetry, visual or aesthetic, period. I mean, that's the biggest ripoff in it. Yeah,
I agree. Although I'm not above watching, really down and dirty, fucked up porn.
Hey, I've seen a lot of max hardcore. I'm not proud to admit it. Talk about that later.
What do you think of DIY?
It's a mood thing,
What do you think of DIY porn? I mean, there's all this upstart, everyone's a rock star, everyone's a movie star now, at least in their mind on social media.
Oh my God.
And so what do you think? What do you think of just the DIY porn?
It's a blessing and a curse. It's like everything these days. It's like, when anyone thinks they can be a pornographer, then you can say it's democratized, on one level, and on the other level, there was a weird phenomenon in the 80s when there was a lot of academics, especially feminist academics in university, were starting to experiment with sex trade work, and so they would get a job there were, academics, maybe upper middle class white chicks or something, and they would get a job in a strip bar or even start turning tricks, not only just to pay the tuition, but also to, because they were studying sex and they wanted to know, have first-hand experiences. But the thing is, a lot of those people kind of got in over their heads and and didn't quite know what, it kind of, I know certain people that it kind of fucked them up a little bit,
Including the Johns were like, hey, something's off here.
No, well, I don't know. I couldn't speak for them, but I mean, I'm a John, but not, but I mean, a hustler and a John in different contexts, but
Switch, you're a switch.
Yeah. But I don't know. It just seems like when everyone has access, like on OnlyFans and all the stuff to making their own porn, I'm not just sure. I'm not sure everyone is actually ready for the sort of what the fallout from that might be, down the line. And also, I just think it's kind of like a lot of people, I feel totally ambivalent about it. It's like, I do think that there should be all sorts of different people with different body types and kind of like people that you wouldn't expect to be doing porn. But on another level, I mean, sometimes
you got to call spade a spade. You're saying
it just doesn't. It doesn't look right.
Okay, it doesn't matter what it look. It doesn't matter what it looks like. But
No.
If you haven't had intimate sex and you don't know what it is, then you're bound to have bad sex. And you can have non-intimate sex once you know what intimate sex is, I feel. And if you don't know what that is first, you're going down a very dark path because it's just putting it on in a different plane.
I mean, you have a lot of things that drive you, I'm sure. I mean, it seems it's not really all one thing, but one thing is your sense of aesthetic. And basically, and to have aesthetic, you have to be critical at some point. And there is this kind of like, the elephant in the room kind of thing where people are putting all these things up there and everyone's like, you're beautiful. And it's like, I think we might be lying here. And that doesn't allow us to be critical to actually have any formed aesthetic. And I guess that's fine.
Well, what I was going to say is, when I started making sexually explicit feature films in the early 90s, which were on Super 8 and 16, part of it was in a reaction against mainstream porn. And I was trying to make something more, it was still explicit, but I was trying to make it more kind of awkward. Like I said earlier, I was saying against awkward, but it's like I was trying to make it seem like more real and more personal. And so if the sex looked awkward because I was actually having sex with my boyfriend who was playing a neo-Nazi skinhead, and it looked like our real awkward sex that we would have in private. For example, I had the camera, Super 8 camera, on a tripod, and I kept on having to run. We were too shy to have anyone else in the room, so it was just running by itself, running lock. And I'd run behind the camera and change the
perspective,
the framing, yeah.
Yep.
But it was also aesthetic. I mean, aesthetics were very, very important. So the quality of the sex was maybe kind of more spontaneous and would show like the awkwardness of it, but it was very rigorously aesthetic always. I mean, and I have a romantic aesthetic where I combined like hardcore punk with my old school Queen love of like romantic Hollywood cinema, and that was like this clash of sensibilities. But there was like you were saying, there was an idea behind it that it was romantic and it was aesthetic and that it was personal. But if you don't have that, and if you just like kind of crash into something and just think, okay, I'm going to show this warts and all, and it's, you better love it because it's me and it's gorgeous, right. And it's like, it doesn't always work that way, It's
no.
Is there any mainstream pornography from the 80s or 90s that you thought, yeah, that's really amazing?
Mainstream. I mean,
when I say mainstream and pornography, it's like almost anathema, but you know what I'm talking about. Bigger budget, lower budget, whatever. I mean, non-arty pornography.
I always try to make porn in the tradition of the great kind of gay avant-garde. So, the directors like from the 70s, like Fred Halstead and Peter Jerome and Wakefield Poole, Peter Berlin, and all those people. So that's what I'm kind of trying to base my movies on. I don't think there was a lot of mainstream porn that kind of continued that tradition in the 80s and 90s, because it was totally steamrolled by video and the democratization of porn because anyone could operate a video camera, and it wasn't made by filmmakers anymore. So aesthetics kind of went out of the window, and narrative went out of the window.
Well,
wait a second, because for a while, and this is at one point, this was my favorite kind of porn, and it was very high budget, very aesthetic, and very arty and very weird, was when there was a certain period of asylum porn, and it was done by people like Michael Mann or even Gregory Dark, who actually had some artistic merit in some of the stuff that he did, which was just hot sex, not stupid exploitation, not with ugly men, which is the basic problem with most hetero pornography, is the disgusting nature of the men and the falsity of the women. But I think during the 80s, 90s, there was a period where actually a few people were rising to a more artistic aesthetic and with bigger budgets and actually taking it. There was also a period where there was like transformer porn, where people would merge into each other, which I thought was, I'm merging into myself all the time, in and out of myself. So I always thought that was fascinating. But
I think that was at that point. I'm making straight porn or bi porn. Back then, you couldn't get me to watch non-gay porn, so maybe I missed all that stuff.
I'll send you some titles. I think it's very important to make bi pornography right now, because it just is. I mean, as in some sectors, people admit the more fluid nature of what sexuality really is. We have the Puritanism, we have the Cardi B's, and then we have the fluidity. I think it's very important to expand the boundaries.
My thing lately with, especially with Erica Lust, is I'm experimenting with having gay men have sex with women.
Excuse me, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
And so what I find interesting is, like, sometimes these gay men who have always had a kind of, especially, they're in their 20s or whatever, they've kind of had a block about it, which I do. I always, I'm a Freudian, I'm a strict Freudian. I believe in constitutional bisexuality. I think everyone has bisexual potential. And I think that I'm a repressed heterosexual. And I think that that heterosexuals are quite often repressed homosexuals as well. And so, I think
repressed bisexuals. I mean,
for sure. And well, same with gays. I mean, there's some gays who could do both, but they're pressured in a way. There's ideological pressure for them to pick a team and stay with it, and they're traitors if they like pussy, and So I find that especially these in the newer generations are kind of a little more curious and a little more and less brainwashed.
Well, I mean, also, and look, it's down to this too. If something is attractive to you, and that's what's attractive in a physical sense or a fetishistic sense, that's what you're attracted to. If you're attracted to an energy source, then it doesn't matter so much who or what physicality that's embodying. It's really down to where you're hooking in to the source of sex, intimacy, or non-intimate sex. I mean, the uprise in anonymous sex via dating apps is, I think very healthy for a lot of people, and could be detrimental to other people. So I'm the jury's out on that one for me. I always interrogate my friends who are active on it, because I just can't imagine myself being on it. I mean, I might as well just put an ad in the butcher shop, which might be more successful for me. It's like hot, bi, boyish looking man, super intelligent, genius, intellectual, has read Henry Miller. I don't even fucking know.
So when you say, going back to, because you're talking about the aesthetics changing, and now, I mean, isn't it also just because pornography is more anonymous in terms of the consumer? The consumer is more lowest common denominator. Used to, in the 70s, you had to go to a porno theater, which is like a little brave just for the general public. Then the video comes in, so you can get it mailed to you, and then now you can just be in the comfort of your own little in front of your computer. So that's already bringing.
But it's like everything else. It's like a vast wasteland now of like imagery. It's like same with photography, same with NFTs. You know, it's like never before in the history of humanity has there been so much bad art.
Everything. Oh,
You
I
know?
like to put it down to this metaphor. If you had never heard a record or music in your life and you walked into what used to be record stores and you were asked to pick out 5 things, 4 of them would suck drastically, if not all 5.
4.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if you
Yeah.
picked out 5, probably, and it's the same with any kind of art, music, pornography, films. I mean, it's just the way it is.
No, and but I think it's like vastly overdetermined now. I think
Absolutely.
there's like a tsunami of bad art, you know, and that's the double-edged sword of democratization. I mean, there used to be an idea that when I was making my sexually explicit films in the, you know, art films in the 90s, it was outrageous for me to be having sex on screen, and these films were playing, you know, at international film festivals. It was considered absolutely outrageous. It was unheard of. Lydia, I know you know all about this. So
well, it was
like,
outrageous that the Whitney Museum chose Fingered as their top cinema of transgression and brought that to Australia and various other places. Of course, that
Right.
was, of course, an outrage.
Right. And when I had my retrospective at MoMA, it's like some people
It's an
were
outrage.
saying, some people were saying, "Oh my God, MoMA's like slumming." You know, it's like finally MoMA has some balls and they're slumming.
Yeah, but also
you know?
that is down to the right person knowing
Yeah.
what has to be
It's all about Raj.
elevate. It's really. I mean,
Yeah.
if Matthew Leblonsky wasn't at the Whitney when they made those huge posters of Fingered and brought me to Australia to discuss, you know, like transgressive cinema, if it wasn't him, it wouldn't happen. If the right person is not in the museum or not at the funding table or not in that museum or not at that club or not at that film festival, it's not going to happen. And this is the crapshoot we take as extremely alternative artists.
Well, and it's just a matter of also like sticking around. And it's like Raj, I knew since the very early days of the experimental queer festival in New York, and he loves transgressive cinema, and so we kind of knew, you know, it's a connection that you have if you stick around long enough. The connections you had way back in the day are going to pay off like later down the road, and they're going to give you access to institutions that you normally wouldn't have access to. But in terms of like the over determination of like porn and everything, I just think that you still have to stick to your guns and have this kind of aesthetic and stylistic and personal vision that you have to weed through so much crap now. I mean, it's unbelievable. If you don't, you have to be really focused. And like I used to be now I'm working for, you know, Erica Lust, which is a mainstream porn company, but
out of Spain, out of Barcelona.
And, you know, they are trying, I'm trying within, even they have restrictions, but one film I made, for example, called Scotch Egg, was about this Scottish guy who picks up a girl at a leather fisting bar. He doesn't even know it's a girl. It's like a girl dressed in leather, but he's so drunk that he thinks she's a guy, and he takes her into the back room and fucks the living daylights out of her the whole time, thinking that she's a guy. And when he's fucking her in the pussy, he thinks he's fucking her in the ass. And and this was a gay, you know, porn actor who was like having sex with this woman. And at a certain point, he believes in his fantasy so much that he's like sucking, it's in the movie, he's like sucking on her dick and pantomiming, even though there's no dick there. He's like going, and then it reverses to his face, and there's cum, you know, spurts all over his face from this, you know,
hallucination or something.
This phantom dick, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing I'm interested in, that you can even get away with these with more mainstream, you know, because
I'm very interested in phantom cock.
Yeah. I'll send you that.
How often are you attacked, either, you know, by words, maybe even physically, and if whatever it is, and if so, has that increased or decreased? And then lastly, has the demographic changed if you are attacked throughout the years?
You know, I'm not attacked nearly enough, I don't think. I mean, sometimes you're like, what the fuck do I have to do to get attacked? You know? It's like, it's like when I used to finally get stalkers, I was like, oh my God, finally I have a stalker. You know? Yeah, sometimes I think people, for me in particular, I think a lot of people actively try to ignore me. I mean, they just try to just pretend it's not happening.
Hey, Bruce, hello. I know what you're talking about. But there's that. And then there is the fact that we've been around so long that fuck you, all you. And I don't care if you fucking ignore me. We're going to do what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So we do have the benefit of longevity. We're not going away. We are not going to stop. We are going to continue. We will find ways to manifest whatever form of creation we want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But the co-optive powers of the mainstream, sometimes they just have a way of like sweeping you under the carpet. I mean,
well, they might co-opt your ideas without ever giving you credit for it. Hello.
That's even worse.
Yeah.
Even worse.
Yeah.
Was Pasolini, was he killed? There's a lot of different theories about how Pasolini died. Do you have any insight on that? And
a really good friend of mine, Christoph, is obsessed with the death of Pasolini, and he walks around in his wallet, not his wallet, it's like the equivalent of what, when men used to take out their wallet and show you pictures of their kids. He pulls out his phone and shows you the death photos of Pasolini, and it's like there are these gruesome photos floating around of exactly what was done to him, and the corpse like on site and in the morgue.
Run over after the
beyond.
Okay.
Beyond. I mean, it was like it was obviously a politically motivated.
Well, after Salo, I mean, let's face fact, it was to transfer the Marquis de Sade to fascist Italy, because as I've said before, what de Sade did in his literature, forget the repetition of the sexual insanity, is he made very apparent that the rich or the political, the bourgeois, they will fucking kill whatever they want. And that's the point of most of the Marquis de Sade's writing. And that when Pasolini transfers that concept to fascism, we see that then he suffered not the imprisonment, but actually the murder of himself.
And then the book, and he was going to make, that he was working on when he died, Petro, right, was about oil and about it was like I'm sure he would have done it. He was about to make it into a movie as well, or had plans to, and he was really going after like corporations,
right? The pornography of the pornography of corporation.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it must. I really do think it was an assassination. I mean,
have you ever seen, the film that I want to see, and I've heard about it for a long time, but I was just investigating it the other day, was Who Killed Teddy Bear with Sal Mineo.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Is it good?
It was just Sal's birthday yesterday.
And that's probably why he's on my mind.
Yeah.
Another person who was killed. For sexuality.
Fellow Capricorn. Yeah, I love that film. He had total hustler energy. I mean, and he directed that production of Fortune in Men's Eyes, which is a great Canadian play actually by Frank Herbert. He's from Eastern Canada, and there's an amazing film version of it. And P.S. Your Cat is Dead. He also has like kind of like sexual kind of subtext, homosexual subtext. He's one of those people from that era that had this, from the Hollywood era, who had that kind of, they had to be repressed, and it came out in all their performances that they had this kind of undercurrent of this perverse undercurrent, but they could never express it, and quite often it ended up
was he killed by it? Was he killed by a John?
He actually wasn't. I think it actually was a
hit,
but you don't know. I think it actually was a random robbery, and he got killed in the back parking lot of his West Hollywood apartment. But there was so much speculation because he lived in those circles. He did live in those kind of, he probably went to Numbers, he probably went to hustler bars, and which, I mean, West Hollywood had a vast wealth of like amazing hustler bars back in those days. And that was the scene he hung out with. So, I mean, you guys saw Scotty Bowers' movie, the Scotty Bowers.
Oh
movie,
yeah,
right?
I
Yeah,
love that book. The book was
Yeah.
great.
yeah, and the book. I read the book as well.
Right. What was that book called again? You remember?
Oh fuck.
No, I don't remember the name of the book either, but
Yeah.
just fill us in on that for a minute. What encapsulate that? Because didn't he start off like working in a gas station, but then hooking up a lot of these?
If you want to go back even further,
Yeah.
Scotty Bowers was in, I think it was Chicago, and he started out as a kid, as like a 12-year-old, pimping for Catholic priests.
So wait, so then he moves to Hollywood. He moves to Hollywood.
Yeah, no, literally, he would find trade for Catholic priests when he was
He's a
12.
natural born hustler, Hustler.
Yeah.
So he moves to Hollywood.
No, he went to he was in World War II. He was at Iwo Jima.
Oh, so he's a sailor also. Okay.
And then he moved to Hollywood, and there was a garage, a gas station that he was working at, and he eventually he got a mobile home, a trailer, and put it behind the gas station
and hooked up all the bi or gay out in the closet Hollywood superstars.
Walter Pigeon or Spencer Tracy would come in for some gas, and
Cole Porter.
The
list is long.
George
the list is
Cukor,
long.
Yeah. And he would like have them, have one of his war buddies, back in one of these trailers behind the gas station. He had 3 of them eventually behind the gas station, and and then he hooked up. I mean, he ended up he slept with Wallace Simpson, with the abdicated king watching while he fucked Wallace Simpson. I mean, it was crazy, and it's authentic. It's authentic because he has he only talks about people after they're dead, and he has no reason to lie. And a lot of the anecdotal stuff, and people that know him totally backed up everything he said. So I really take what he said as gospel. He has no point. He's not like Kenneth Anger, who made up like a lot of bullshit, which we love him for. But I mean,
Speak for yourself.
He made it seem a lot more glamorous than it actually was in a way. But
depending on your mood, it can be kind of glamorous in a mobile home behind a gas station. If you're fucking Cole Porter, I don't know. I'm just saying.
I can't think of anything more glamorous.
I'm telling you, we missed our. We're just a couple of decades too late.
Well, there's a story where Cole Porter.
I love the dinner party.
No. He had like 9, 10, or 10 black guys like lined up, and he sucked them off one by one. Apparently, according to Scotty Bauer.
I've heard Luther Vandross stories similar to that. But,
different time, different place.
Well, so you're obviously busy when you're not making stuff. You're trying to raise the money. Blah blah blah. How do you still watch a lot of films that are not? I mean, do you have time to take in a lot of other people's material? Or
to tell you the truth, I'm so alienated from modern Hollywood cinema.
Okay.
I really.
What about television? Because there's much better things on TV than
there
is
much
right
better
now.
things on TV.
I mean, there is much better stuff.
But you only have so much time. You only have so much time in a day, right?
Yeah. I mean, I watch, I think, what I feel like I need to watch, and but lately, like I've been watching like old Japanese movies by Oshima and Kurosawa that I haven't seen before, or I'm watching like what did I just watch, like old I'm more into like, it's really my Queenie old school
Bring
side.
it out, tell us.
Yeah, I know, I'm just into like TCM and watching like today they had like a Constance Bennett and Kay Francis film festival all day, back-to-back films, and I can watch that shit like forever, so the new Hollywood cinema I'm not so into.
I can't think of the last film that made an impression on me, but I can think of multiple docuseries, or even I'm not big on television fiction, but I can think of a lot more amazing shows than any films.
I want to see Benedetta, the Verhoeven
I saw
movie.
Benedetta.
Is that okay?
I'm a huge Paul Verhoeven.
I am too.
I interviewed him once. It's actually in a book of interviews about him when I worked for Index magazine. But I was a little disappointed with Benedetta. Maybe my expectations were too high.
I want to see Nightmare Alley, the new Guillermo del Toro.
I guess. I mean, I wasn't a fan of Shape of Water.
Well, the reason I was is I saw it on a plane, and it's the best you can get on a plane, and
Yeah.
aesthetically
Well,
gorgeous.
also,
I
the lack
theme
of
a bit
oxygen. The lack of
Yeah,
oxygen up in those
yeah.
planes, my perception of movies is totally
Oh,
different when I'm in a
I
plane.
really don't like remakes, but Nightmare. I do like film
but the
noir.
original
That period is so great.
The original is a masterpiece.
I was gonna ask about film noir because I mean things like Shock Corridor, Berserk, Snake Pit. I really love that era of film. I really love William Castle. I really love Samuel Fuller. I love Liz Taylor films. I love Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, one of my favorites.
Of course. I mean, Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, the ultimate. I love her 70s films where she always played kind of louche.
Butterfield 8.
Well, yeah. Well, that was late 50s.
She didn't want to do that, and then she won the Academy Award.
But my favorite is The Driver's Seat. You know, in the 70s, her Italian film by Giuseppe Petroni Griffi, and it's based on a novel by Muriel Spark, and she plays this woman in her. It's like Liz kind of at her seedy prime, and she goes to Italy to find the perfect man to murder her, basically to fuck. She wants to be basically fucked and murdered to death at the same time.
Understood.
It's insane. It's an insane film. It was actually shot by Vittorio Storaro between kind of The Conformist and Apocalypse Now. It's it's one of the most beautiful pieces of cinematography that my favorite of European cinema. And she plays this eccentric, bizarre character. It really prefigures a lot of ideas about modern terrorism and paranoia and as well. But she had that period in the 70s where she made a film called X, Y, and Z with Michael Caine, where she ends up, her husband, Michael Caine, is having an affair with a woman. And so she ends up fucking the woman to get him back and say,
go Liz.
She's like, I fucked her. Why do you want her?
Yeah, exactly. She's done with it. Did you know that The Last Tango in Paris was originally meant for two men?
Oh my God, remake.
Well, that might be your job. And also, I mean, I really dying to see this.
Down.
I'm dying to see it again because one of the monologues that Marlon Brando has, which was right after his real life wife died, is just an improvisation. It's not that it's a great film. It would have been better with two men. And it ruined Marina Schneider's life. But the monologue, I keep remembering parts of this monologue. I have to see it, of Marlon Brando just riffing, because at his finest, he was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, and what's his name? The director.
Bertolucci.
Bertolucci allowed him to use that to be as his kind of final kind of statement to Hollywood. And everything he did after that was kind of downhill. But
other than Apocalypse Now.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, Coppola allowed him to do it as well. The horror.
The horror. Do you know that the opening of Apocalypse Now, the scene where Martin Sheen is under the spinning fan and the Doors is playing, was actually ripped off from the Harvey Keitel film, Who's That Knocking on My Door?
Oh.
Well, that's just as a film buff. I'm letting
ripped off in what way?
It was exactly that. There was right.
Okay.
It was about Harvey Keitel looking for the perfect gal, and it's this empty loft, wrought iron bed, fan overhead spinning as he's fucking different women, and the end is playing. Check that, if you will. Nice. And Harvey Keitel meets this gal he likes, but she's been raped, and he can't accept it. So, I think this was. I don't think it was Brian De Palma, and I don't think it was Scorsese, but it was one of Harvey Keitel's first films. Who's That Knocking at My Door?
Yeah, it's Scorsese.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. So, they were all jerking each other off anyway. Unfortunately for us, the films followed.
What year was that? That was probably 68 or
something. One of my favorite films, Bruce, is Rip Torn in Coming Apart.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Bruce, do you prefer Rip Torn or Rip Taylor?
I
he-
love them both. I love them both.
yeah, just check out the
I love-
synopsis. Check out
yeah.
the synopsis for Coming Apart. And it's rarely shown. The guy only made one film. Rip Torn plays a psychologist who's all his clients are women. He's in a New York apartment, windows all behind him, will not go to see his wife in Long Island. Sally Kirkland's in it. And it's just Rip Torn at his finest.
I just saw, A Face in the Crowd, the Elia Kazan movie with Andy Griffith and Patricia Neal. Rip Torn has an amazing cameo in that movie.
He's so fantastic.
He plays like the after Andy Griffith is discredited and he's out the door, Rip Torn is going to be the replacement for him, the new kind of sexy hayseed that they brought up to replace Andy Griffith. And he's totally uncredited in the film, and he looks like so gorgeous.
The name alone and his attitude alone. I read that. I don't know if this was in Raging Bulls, the book, where him and Dennis Hopper got into a fight at a restaurant. They just didn't like each other, and they took it outside and were throwing trash cans at each other. But I mean, the name alone. Rip Torn.
Well, there's a film where he and Norman Mailer are having a fist fight as well, I believe. So, yeah, he was a
badass.
The badass, the man who fell to earth. I mean, he was in so many obscure kind of like roles. I love him, and of course, he was married to Geraldine Page, who's one of my favorite, Hollywood actresses.
As a Canadian, are you kind of like preconditioned to just love professional wrestling?
Well, Bret Hart is my personal favorite. Bret the Hitman.
Only for porn purposes.
Okay, fair.
I only use wrestling for porn purposes.
Look, I've had so many porn fantasies myself and Bret the Hitman Hart. I don't even want to start. Don't even start me off. All right, just end it there. End it there.
He is gorgeous.
Oh, he was. Oh my God. Anyway, we're gonna have to close this out and put a XXX rating on it. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Bruce LaBruce. So good talking to you, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, pleasure meeting you, Bruce.
Yeah.